What if the single most important waterway on Earth had been quietly locked from the inside, and the world almost missed it? Because that is exactly what just happened in the Strait of Hormuz, and what you are about to hear changes the way power works in the Persian Gulf from this moment forward. Before we go any further, do me a quick favor. If this kind of breakdown matters to you, tap that like button right now, hit subscribe, and share this with one person who still thinks geopolitics is too complicated to follow. It genuinely keeps this channel alive, and I read every single comment that comes through. To understand why this story matters, you have to picture a strip of ocean, not a wide ocean. A strip. The Strait of Hormuz is the thin ribbon of water between Iran to the north and Oman and the United Arab Emirates to the south. At its narrowest point, it is barely 21 nautical miles across. That is it. That is the entire gateway. And through that skinny corridor, roughly 1/5 of every drop of oil traded on the planet passes every single day. We are talking about more than 20 million barrels of crude in the first half of 2025 alone, and that figure has only grown since. Saudi crude, Emirati crude, Kuwaiti crude, Iraqi crude, Qatari liquefied natural gas, all of it has to squeeze through this one pinch point before it can fan out to the rest of the world. Japan depends on it, China depends on it, India depends on it, South Korea depends on it, Europe depends on it. When you hear analysts say the global economy runs on Hormuz, they are not being dramatic. They are describing a physical reality that affects the price you pay at the pump in any country you happen to live in. And that is exactly why Iran has spent decades treating this strip of water like a loaded weapon sitting in its backyard. For Tehran, Hormuz is not just geography, it is leverage. Close the strait and oil markets panic. Fuel prices spike in every country with a gas tank. Supply chains seize up. Whole economies start gasping. The strait is the bottom mines in any country you happen to live in. Modern weapons. And that is exactly why Iran has spent decades treating this strip of water like a loaded weapon sitting in any country you happen to live in. For Tehran, and that is exactly not just geography. It is leverage. Treating this strip of water like a loaded weapon sitting in its bottom mines, drifting mines, modern weapons, far more sophisticated than anything you saw in old war films. Terrifyingly cheap to build, terrifyingly hard to find, and exactly the kind of leverage a smaller navy uses against a much larger one. Here is what that word really means, mine, because most people hear it and think of something quaint, a relic from a black and white film. A contact mine is the simpler version. A ship sails over it, the hull physically touches the case, and the weapon detonates. Brutal, simple, effective. An influence mine is more sinister. It sits on the seabed in the mud, or floats tethered just above the bottom, and it does not wait for contact. It listens. It reads the magnetic field of a passing hull. It picks up the acoustic signature of a turning propeller. It senses the pressure wave as a 60,000-ton supertanker pushes a column of water aside above it. When the right combination of those signatures lines up, the mine fires on its own. You never see it. You never touch it. It finds you. And for the largest commercial vessels on Earth, the margin between a safe transit and a catastrophic environmental disaster is literally the wrong inch of ocean floor. Iran knew all of this. Iran was counting on it, because clearing a serious minefield in contested water is one of the hardest jobs in naval warfare. It is slow. It is dangerous. It requires ships sailing slowly through zones where one mistake ends careers. And in the Hormuz seabed, full of mud, natural debris, old wrecks, confusing sonar returns, the search becomes a nightmare that can stretch on for months, which is exactly why military planners in Washington, London, and Tokyo had quietly feared a mined Hormuz for decades, and why Iran had come to treat the threat as untouchable, which is exactly where the story takes the sharp turn nobody saw coming. Because something embarrassing happened on the Iranian side, something almost hard to believe. The Revolutionary Guards lost track of where they put their own mines. Stop and think about that for a second. You are the regime that just announced to the world that you are willing to threaten global energy supply on your own. You just scattered more than 100 weapons of mass economic disruption across the most important waterway on Earth. And then you cannot tell anyone, not your allies, not your own naval commanders, not even yourselves, exactly where every single one of them is sitting. According to American officials speaking to multiple outlets, Iranian forces did not have the technology, the institutional memory, or frankly, the operational discipline to map, recover, or detonate the weapons they had just laid. They were stuck. They had built their own trap and then lost the combination. Under the terms of a broader diplomatic memorandum in June, Iran formally agreed to clear its own mines. It did not. It could not. And that is where the United States Navy walked into the story and rewrote the rulebook. What followed was, in my honest assessment, the most significant mine countermeasures operation of the modern era. Not because of how many mines were cleared, although there were many, but because of how it was done. More than 100 objects located, identified, and neutralized, and not a single American diver entered the water. 0. Every layer of the operation was unmanned. Robotics, autonomous systems, lasers, sonar, drones above the surface, drones below the surface, all of it feeding data to operators watching from a safe distance. The United States just demonstrated to the entire world that the era of putting human sailors into a live minefield is ending, and the era of machines doing that work is here. Let me walk you through how the architecture was actually built, because the design itself is beautiful. There were 3 layers, each one handling a different slice of the problem, each one feeding information into the next. Think of it like a sandwich. Air on top, surface in the middle, seabed on the bottom. None of them overlap. All of them connect. And every layer was built around a single operating principle. Keep American skin out of the blast radius. Layer 1 flies. The platform is the MH-60S Seahawk helicopter, a workhorse that has been hunting submarines, running rescue missions, and supporting combat operations across multiple theaters for years. Slung underneath it is a pod called the Airborne Laser Mine Detection System, ALMDS, 9 feet long, around 800 pounds. And what it does sounds almost like science fiction until you realize it has actually been operating in the Gulf for years. The pod fires a pulsed laser straight down into the water column. Not a continuous beam, pulses, very fast, very precise. The light enters the water, bounces off anything in the path, and returns to a sensor that reads the return signal through something called streak tube imaging. What comes out the other end is a full 3-dimensional volumetric picture of everything floating or drifting between the surface and the seabed. You see mines that are tethered, you see mines that are loose, you see anything with an unusual shape moving in the water. And the helicopter does not have to stop, it does not have to hover, it does not have to lower anything into the sea. It flies a grid pattern at operational speed, and the forward motion is part of how the laser builds the picture. 1 pass, miles of ocean. A digital map handed off in near real time to the next layer below. Layer 2 operates on the surface, and this is where the story starts sounding like the future I was promised as a kid and never quite received. Shipped into the strait were unmanned surface vessels, robot boats, around 38 feet of aluminum, diesel-powered, semi-autonomous, with a payload bay in the middle that you can reconfigure depending on the mission of the day. Need rescue capability, the bay handles it. Need mine hunting, you bolt on the sonar and sensors. Need to detonate a target, you configure for that. 1 hull, multiple missions, no crew member who can be killed. Towing behind these vessels is the AQS-20C sonar system, which is genuinely exceptional. Forward-looking sonar, side-scan sonar, echo-optical sensors. The whole rig hunts bottom mines, moored mines, drift mines, anything from the mudline all the way up to the surface in a single pass. One sweep gives you an enormous swath of high-resolution picture of the search area. But the real genius of this layer was the unmanned influence sweep system it could also tow. Picture a long magnetic cable trailing behind the boat, paired with an acoustic generator pumping out the right frequencies. The combination produces the electromagnetic and acoustic signature of a real warship, a big warship, a ship that is not actually there. It is a ghost. As the unmanned boat drags that ghost signature through the water, every influence mine lying in wait reads the signal, decides a valid target is passing overhead, fires, and detonates underneath a patch of empty ocean. No ship, no crew, no casualty. The mine simply destroys itself chasing a phantom that never existed. It is elegant. It is brutal. And it changes the math of mine warfare in a way that will be studied in naval academies for the next 20 years. Layer 3 goes under everything. 90 feet down, 2 meters above the seabed, a torpedo-shaped undersea drone moves in. A slow, methodical lawnmower pattern, its high-resolution sonar painting every irregularity on the ocean floor. It is looking for shapes that do not fit. Shapes that look almost like rocks, but are slightly too symmetrical. Shapes that sit just under the sediment, because that is where the smart mines go. You do not float them on the surface, where an aircraft can spot them. You sink them into the mud and let the silt cover them over time. They sit there, invisible, patient, waiting for the right hull to pass overhead. Except now the drone is running precise grids across that same mud and it finds them. It builds a 3-dimensional image of what is buried below the sediment. It marks the coordinates. It identifies the object. And either another system comes in to neutralize it, or a contracted explosive ordnance team handles the detonation from a safe distance. More than 100 objects located through this combination. Laser-equipped helicopters scanning the water column from above. Robot boats sweeping and hunting on the surface. Undersea drones painting. The seabed from below. 3 layers. 0 divers in the danger zone. Every piece of the operation designed to keep American personnel away from objects built to destroy ships. That is the doctrine shift we are witnessing in real time. and it just passed its most serious field test ever. If you have gotten this far, you are exactly the kind of viewer this channel is built for. Quick pause. If this is adding value to your understanding of the world, drop a comment below with the single moment that hit you hardest, and share this video with the one friend who always has a take on geopolitics, but never has the time to read the full background. The community around this channel is what makes it work, and I genuinely read every comment that lands in the inbox. To appreciate how dramatic this shift really is, you have to understand what came before. The ships that used to do this work were extraordinary pieces of engineering, and they were also a quiet act of national sacrifice. The Avenger-class mine-countermeasures vessels were built with hulls made of wood and fiberglass and other materials that do not trigger influence mines. That is not a design choice, that is a survival choice. The hull itself had to be invisible to the sensors inside the very weapons it was hunting. Their crews had a nickname, the Iron Men in wooden ships. You are sailing slowly through a field of live explosives, hunting each one in turn, and one mistake ends the ship and everyone on it. 4 of those Avenger-class vessels were based in Bahrain. All 4 have now been decommissioned. The Sea Dragon helicopter, a special-purpose mine hunting aircraft, had its sunset ceremony in March of 2025. America retired the old tools. America bet on the new ones. And in the most consequential mine clearance operation of the modern era, that bet paid off. The robots did what the wooden ships used to do, and they did it without asking anyone to sail into a minefield on a hull made of fiberglass and courage. Now here is the part of the story I want you to sit with, because it is the part most outlets buried under technical jargon, and that is the actual strategic meaning. Iran did not really need the mines to sink ships. Iran needed the mines to be believable. The whole point of mining Hormuz was never military destruction. It was political pressure. The threat was the weapon. The message was simple. Push us too far, and we lock the door to 1/5 of global oil supply. The world looks at the strait, sees a minefield it cannot guarantee is clear, and starts making rational economic decisions. Tankers wait, oil stops flowing, prices spike, diplomats start sweating. Tehran gets leverage without firing a shot at anything that matters. The mines were a political weapon dressed up as a military one, and the United States just defused that weapon completely. Not with a bombing campaign that could be spun as aggression, not with sanctions that take years to bite, not with a speech at the United Nations that everyone politely ignores, with machines. With autonomous systems, with technology that did not exist in its current form even 5 years ago. The technology cleared the threat. The technology announced the clearance publicly. The technology drew a red line about what comes next. And the technology is now watching the water 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from above the surface, below the surface, and from orbit itself. President Trump posted the formal announcement himself, and the language matters more than usual. He confirmed that all mines had been removed or detonated from the international waters of the Strait. That is the headline. But then he added something heavier. He stated that Iran had been formally notified that any ship or boat placing new mines will be immediately and systematically destroyed. And he pointed out that through United States Space Force assets, the entire square mileage of the Strait is under constant observation. Let that settle. That is not just a statement about what already happened. That is a statement about what will happen if Tehran tries this card again. It is a red line drawn in satellite imagery and stealth aircraft. It is a zero-tolerance policy on mine placement in the most important waterway on Earth. Put a mine in that water and the boat that put it there ceases to exist. Not after a round of diplomatic notes. Not after a United Nations resolution. Immediately. By now you have probably realized this is not just a story about the Persian Gulf. This is a story about the future of naval power. And if you're enjoying this kind of breakdown, the easiest way to support it is the subscribe button. It costs you nothing. It helps the algorithm push this work to people who genuinely need it, and I do not take a single subscription for granted. Let me shift to the part of the story that talking heads have not been giving enough airtime, and that is the economic dimension. Because what is happening inside Iran right now is almost as dramatic as what happened in the Strait, and it tells you everything about whether the regime has the internal runway to try anything new. The Iranian rial opened its most recent trading week at roughly 2 million rial to a single United States dollar. To put that in human terms, when this whole escalation began back in early March, the same exchange rate was around 500,000 rial to the dollar. In the span of a few months, the rial has lost roughly 75% of its value against the United States dollar. That is not a currency wobbling. That is a currency in free fall. That is an economy being hollowed out from the inside, while state television narrates a story of strength and dignity. People in Iranian cities are starting to talk more openly than they have in years. Footage is moving through social media. The regime's grip on the information environment inside its own borders is slipping. And the pain is landing on shopkeepers, teachers, engineers, families trying to buy groceries and pay rent in a currency that is worth a fraction of what it was worth a few months back. The system is not catching them. The Revolutionary Guard networks have their own ways of insulating themselves. The ordinary people do not. One senior figure went on Iranian state television not long ago and promised what he called a seismic response to the American economic campaign. He declared that not a single additional drop of oil would leave the region. It was a tough statement, broadcast with the right soundtrack, delivered for a domestic audience that wants to hear defiance. But while he was saying that, between 6 and 10 million barrels of oil were transiting the southern part of the strait every single day. The gap between state television rhetoric and the lived experience of ordinary Iranians is becoming too wide to paper over, and every day that the Hormuz mining card sits publicly dismantled on the world stage is another day the regime loses a piece of leverage it cannot recreate. So what does Iran still have? I want to be fair about this because lazy analysis is not useful to anyone. Iran still has fast attack boats, hundreds of them, organized around a doctrine of swarming larger warships in confined water. Iran still has proxy networks in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, networks that can launch strikes, threaten shipping, manufacture incidents, complicate the diplomatic picture. Iran still has a ballistic missile arsenal that, while significantly degraded by recent strikes, has not been eliminated entirely. And Iran still has the human option, the desperate option, the option of a leadership that wakes up one morning and decides continued restraint is more painful than escalation. History is full of desperate regimes doing desperate things, and ignoring that would be malpractice. The right posture, therefore, is not triumphalism. The right posture is quiet, relentless vigilance. Trust the deterrent. Enforce the red line. Keep the satellite architecture running 24/7. Keep the F-35s overhead. Keep the seafloor drones rotating through the strait. Because the threat does not end when a general gives a press conference. The threat ends when it is no longer viable, when every available avenue for aggression is watched, tracked, and answered in seconds, not days. That is the architecture being built in the Persian Gulf right now. It is not an army of occupation. It is a surveillance and response network designed to make the math of Iranian aggression consistently work out negative. Mines in the water watched and cleared within hours. Fast attack boats moving aggressively, visible from orbit and answered by aircraft already on station. Proxy launches from Yemen or Iraq, tracked back to origin and answered in kind. The whole system is engineered to make aggression too costly to attempt. And what we just witnessed was the system working exactly as designed. If you have ever shared a video of mine before, this is the one to share now. Text it to a friend, post it in a group chat, send it to someone who still relies on headline news for their understanding of the world. The difference between a one-sentence headline and a real understanding of what just happened in Hormuz is, frankly, enormous. And the only way this kind of work stays alive is if people like you pass it forward. Let me zoom out one more time, beyond Iran, because there is a broader implication that matters to every navy and every coastline on Earth. What we just saw in the Strait was the first serious real-world test of a fully unmanned mine-countermeasures architecture operating in a live, contested environment. Not a test range, not a training exercise, not a carefully produced video for a defense contractor's marketing team. An actual minefield in an actual strait with real shipping waiting on the other side, and the system worked. Undersea drones mapping the bottom, unmanned surface vessels hunting and sweeping, laser-equipped helicopters painting the water column from above, all of it feeding data into a single operational picture that human commanders could review and act on in near real time. All of it redirectable, based on what the sensors were finding right now, not on what was planned yesterday. And the deeper you look at that, the more the implications start to rearrange everything you thought you knew about naval power. The hardest part of mine clearance has always been the human cost. Divers in the water, minesweepers sailing slowly through fields of live ordnance, crews spending weeks doing methodical grids in waters that might kill them at any moment. That human risk has always been the limiting factor on how fast a navy can clear a minefield, how willing commanders are to attempt it under fire, how much political cost exists for even trying. Remove the human from the equation, and you remove the limiting factor. Machines do not get tired. Machines do not feel fear. Machines do not need to rotate out after a 6-hour shift. You can run the grid patterns continuously around the clock, swap fresh batteries, redeploy assets, keep the mission going indefinitely. Speed goes up. Risk to personnel drops to near zero. Political cost of attempting the mission collapses. And that means the deterrent value of the mines themselves collapses, which means Iran's entire strategic model for using cheap sea mines as leverage against a technologically superior adversary has just been undermined, not just in this one operation, but conceptually, going forward, for every Navy watching. Other defense ministries are taking notes, Other navies are studying what just happened in the Gulf. The era of unmanned mine countermeasures as a real operational capability. Not a concept on a PowerPoint slide, but a real capability that just delivered in combat conditions is here. And it got its proof of concept in the Strait of Hormuz. That single sentence will be quoted in classrooms and strategy documents for the next generation. And now let me bring you home. Iran walked into this conflict holding what its leadership genuinely believed was the ultimate card, the Strait of Hormuz. The ability to mine it, to threaten it, to make every government on Earth flinch at the thought of a closed waterway and all the economic catastrophe that comes with it. That card is gone, not because of a bombing campaign that could be framed as Western aggression, not because of sanctions that take a decade to bite, not because anyone invaded anyone. The card is gone because the United States Navy, using technology that did not exist in its current form even 5 years ago, cleared the entire minefield faster than Iran expected, more thoroughly than Iran could match, and then drew a red line that is physically enforced by a surveillance architecture now watching every inch of the water from space, from the air, and from under the surface. Iran can try to lay more mines. If it does, the boats that lay them will be located within minutes and destroyed within hours. That is the promise. The operation that just finished is the proof that the promise is credible. 1/5 of the world's oil supply still flows through that strait every single day. And the United States has just made it clear in the most unambiguous possible terms that it flows on American terms. Not Iranian terms, not IRGC terms, American terms. And that shift in the strategic equation, the durable, machine-enforced kind, not the kind that crumbles after the next election cycle, is more significant than any single airstrike or sanctions package or diplomatic communique because it is built to last. What happens next is the question every serious follower of this conflict should be asking. Does Iran try to reconstitute the mining threat in some other form? Do fast attack. Boats start behaving more aggressively. Do we see a proxy escalation in Yemen or Iraq designed to create a different kind of pressure on the strait? What does a desperate leadership in Tehran actually do when its most important piece of leverage has just been publicly dismantled, broadcast for the entire world to see, and answered with a clean, precise, technological solution that they cannot replicate at any reasonable cost? These are the moves left on the board, and they are the moves we will be tracking here every single week, with the same level of detail and the same refusal to flatten the story into a soundbite. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a line on a map. It is the artery through which the modern world keeps moving. And for the first time in decades, the balance of how that artery is protected has shifted in a way that powers in Tehran cannot undo with rhetoric alone. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end. If this video taught you something the headlines did not, do 2 things for me before you go. Hit that subscribe button so you do not miss what comes next, and share this video with someone who still believes the Strait of Hormuz is just a piece of trivia that does not affect them. They need this story more than they know, and so does everyone in their gas station line. Stay sharp, stay informed, and I will see you in the next one.